in order to weather storms, not only in the Arctic, but in life, you have to put yourself in the storm.
I literally hiked 2 miles to come arrow this duck.
And it's the best meal you've ever had in your life.
Yeah.
I am freezing cold the entire time. I hiked more than I'd ever hiked in my life. And I was like, that was awesome.
Through your curiosities and our engagements and your questions, it just was going to allow me to dive deeper into the things that I hold most dear to my heart.
Welcome to 2%. I am your host, Michael Easter. I am really thrilled about this podcast. We are now on episode 2. We're off and rolling. Today we have an amazing episode, but before we get in, if you are unfamiliar with me, you might have seen me on the Joe Rogan Experience or the Huberman Lab podcast or various TV shows. My background, I'm a health and adventure journalist. I've been doing this for 20 years. I started at Men's Health. I was a professor for 7 years. And then I ended up writing the books, The Comfort Crisis and Scarcity Brain, which became bestsellers. And the thrust of my work is that improving your life, it often takes doing hard things. So this is what this podcast is about. Now, our name comes from a study that found that 2% of people take the stairs when there's also an escalator available. Only 2%. I would argue 100% of people knew that taking the stairs would be better for their long-term health and well-being. Yet 98% of people choose to do the easier, more effortless thing. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a tribe of 2%ers that are willing to take on challenges big and small in their life to improve in the long run. Today, we're talking to Donnie Vincent. Donnie is a backcountry bow hunter and filmmaker who travels into the world's most remote, extreme areas for months at a time, and he makes these movies. And I like to describe them as being a lot like the Planet Earth series, except they happen to have hunting. And he's really changing the face of hunting and how it is perceived. He's thinking about ethics. He's thinking about the life cycle and where our food comes from. He's thinking about conservation. He's thinking about what extended time in wild places doing hard things does for the human body, mind, and spirit. Now, I first met Donnie when I was an editor at Men's Health magazine. I ended up profiling him for the magazine. We become very fast friends, and then he ends up calling me like months later. He goes, Michael, I'm going up to the Arctic on an extreme and dangerous hunt for more than a month. Do you want to come along? We are going to see grizzly bears and climb ancient mountains, and it is going to be the most epic adventure a human being has ever gone on. So I said yes, and then I find myself up in the Arctic. We have this amazing, incredible adventure that tested me in every single way, but I will tell you this. I came out the other side a better person, and Donnie was a key guide in getting me to realize the value of challenge during that stint up in the Arctic. We had all these moments up there, like when a storm would roll in. We had this one time, we were camped on a hillside, and this crazy windstorm rolls in, and it almost totally destroys our camp. And I was freaking out because if you lose your tent in the Arctic, you are screwed. Like, you are absolutely screwed. But Donnie just went into solve the problem mode. He was calm. He got everything fixed. It was just like watching him made me realize, in order to weather storms, not only in the Arctic, but in life, you have to put yourself in the storm, because that is where you figure out how to live, how to improve, and how to be a better person. So that's what we're going to talk to Donnie about. So with that all said, let's welcome Donnie. Donnie Vincent, welcome to 2%.
Dude, I'm beyond honored to sit down and talk with you. Obviously, we're friends, but this is different.
This is
entirely
awesome.
different.
What was your reaction to getting an email from an editor at Men's Health?
Yeah. Somebody just asked me this the other day that had just read The Comfort Crisis, and they asked how you found me. And I said, I actually don't know if you were asking around and my name popped up. But first of all, I get asked almost daily by someone if they can join me on a hunt, whether that be, a military guy, a kid, a parent, whatever. But yeah, I don't know, just the professionalism in which you went about it. And even in your email, there was an instant seriousness to it that your curiosity was real. You weren't trying to get a free hunt out of it. Not that anyone else is either, but your curiosity was real. It was honest.
Yeah, and that was in Nevada. That would have been, 2019? That was an elk hunt?
Yeah, 2018, 2019, something like that. Yeah.
So for this men's health story, we go hunting in Nevada. And I will say this, I was coming from Las Vegas and it was hot as hell in Vegas. And we get up to about 11,000 feet. I am freezing cold the entire time. I was hungry the entire time. I hiked more than I'd ever hiked in my life. And it was absolutely rough. But I came home and I was like, that was awesome. And it gave me the seed of an idea of asking, well, why was that such a valuable experience, which eventually led me to pitching the Comfort Crisis to a publisher. They said yes. But then I had to make the big ask of asking you, hey, man, can I go on one of these crazy month-long hunts you go on? So I asked you, and you said yes. Why did you say yes?
But honestly, Michael, the questions you were asking me in Nevada that I struggled to answer, because I remember specifically one morning we were sitting up and it was kind of chilly out, and you're asking me, I've told this story before, but you're like, hey, are you cold? And I said, yeah, I'm cold. And you said, well, you don't look cold. And you said that you were cold, but you said that you yourself were cold and you looked like you were cold. I was also cold. And you said, but how come you don't look cold? And I was just, well, it's just, I know, the sun's coming up. We're going to warm up. I have extra clothes, whatever it is. But then you started asking me questions about hunting and things that I thought were going to be a slam dunk to answer, like, why do you hunt? And why do you think we hunt? And these were questions that I really struggled to answer with you. And I could anecdotally hit elements of it that I enjoyed, watching the sun come up or, listening to animals or watching animals. I could strike on these little points, but really not dive into the seriousness and what it means. And then when we parted ways and you brought the project of the Comfort Crisis to me, I just took it as this is a project that is going to it's going to allow me to learn more about myself and more about being a hunter and more through your curiosities and our engagements and your questions and things that you find uncomfortable. And it just was going to allow me to dive deeper into the things that I hold most dear to my heart.
What do you remember most from our hunts in Alaska?
I remember a lot of things, but honestly, probably the thing that is most striking to me was how uncomfortable you were to take your first animal, which meant the world to me because it's really uncomfortable for me to take an animal. And rarely do I see that in another. And I'm not saying that other guys don't feel that. I think they do. I think a lot of us bury it, hide it, whether it be on camera to our buddies or whatever, but you didn't have the position or the wherewithal to bury it or hide it. You just it was out. And I appreciated it very much. The uncomfortability that you went through and also the uncertainty. I remember the tarmac with the airplanes. I remember you realizing that I wasn't joking. We are flying out in little tiny airplanes with pilots that are very skilled but hold no control over the weather or what is going to happen. And so those are very defining moments for me. It's when you took your animal and then the flight out.
Yeah, totally. I remember so much of that trip and think about it all the time. But to your point about taking an animal, let me just say, if you're listening and you have any qualms with hunting, we're going to get into Donnie's worldview about hunting, which I think is really nuanced and important. But I'll say this. After I took that animal, I definitely went through, I was totally sad. I was angry at you guys for a minute. It was just all these emotional swings. But eventually after going through that, I think I started to understand, this is why Donnie does what he does. And had you not, because I remember your position on that was, you don't have to hunt. I'm not going to make you hunt. At the same time, I think you would understand this greater topic that you're writing about if you were to hunt. And so for me, I trusted you on that. And immediately after, I go, why did I trust this son of a bitch? This is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I'm never coming back from this. But then afterwards, I got it. And that just totally changed me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. You could have come just like you did in Nevada. You could have come and written the story and written the book about the things that we were doing from the outside of the fire, if you will. But if you wanted to truly dive into an experience and have those emotions well up, you were going to have to take an animal's life. And I specifically remember your sadness. I specifically remembered your anger. I also remember when we were caribou, uh, their faces, even when they're alive, when they're close to you, when you see their eyes and their big, huge, bulbous nostrils, they're a very sweet looking animal. They're people always like to use this word. It has no position in wilderness and wildlife, but people like to say they have an innocence about them. They look like a creature that could do no harm. They look like a curious animal. They almost have eyes. They have looks like your dog might look at you. But I remember when you took that animal's life, and you took a fine bull, an old bull. That's what we do. That's how we try and do it. We try to remove animals from the herd that are going to have very little impact on the herd. And I remember when you took that bull, the quietness that the Arctic brings, other than a little bit of wind, is very, very haunting. There's nothing as far as you can see other than pure wilderness, some mountains, some trees, rivers, but there's nothing as far as you can see. There's a true aloneness that you feel there other than the people that you share that time with. And then your bull was laying there. There's a melancholy piece to this. And then I remember when we started skinning your bull and you started to see, dare I say, meat products that you also have seen in the grocery store. I remember you were like, oh, now that the skin's off, now that we're breaking the animal down, it's starting to look like steaks. And then I saw you kind of go, oh. And I still, to this day, if I kill a moose or a black bear and you walk up on it, there's a sadness to it. And you start breaking the animal down, you start doing the work, you start earning these calories that you're going to have this winter or over the summer, or whatever it is. You start getting the blood on your hands and feeling the weight in your backpack. And it starts to transition into a workload that is, quite an investment and a respect that you have for wild places.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into to talk about kind of your overall worldview on hunting, because hunting is obviously controversial among a lot of people.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that? And how do you have conversations with people who may be anti-hunting, maybe vegetarian or vegan? What do those look like? And how do you sort of shape that?
It's in a manner of which you carry yourself in. It isn't smoke and mirrors. There isn't this position of you have to dance around the subject matter or come up with clever sentences or clever statements and to sell what you're doing. It is who we were as a people, and ecosystems do very, very well to be hunted. Most do anyway. And obviously human beings have encroached into a lot of wild areas, and we've pressured a lot of game in different areas where some animals are going extinct, and then some other animals that do very well near human beings, like the white-tailed deer, are exploding and need their numbers taken down by hunters, or else there's just an immense amount of car collisions and things like that. If you want to carry yourself in a manner that is going to engage good conversation with non-hunters or anti-hunters or vegetarians, vegans, whatever it is, people love when things are black and white, but nothing actually is black and white. We live in the gray position. And so we better carry ourselves and be open for thoughtful questions around this thing, because you might get asked a question, Michael, that actually changes your thought process and might actually make you think about a process that you're doing that you maybe shouldn't be. When I think hunting right now, particularly everything on social media is grandiose. People that call themselves hunters right now and some of the things that they do are very difficult to justify and very difficult to kind of contemplate, because it isn't man versus beast. It isn't man versus wild. This is an immersion of who we are. And there's a big difference between conquering a land and shooting a limit than there is kind of becoming one with predator and prey and really enveloping yourself in the natural world.
Yeah. And you've made the point, if a person eats meat, typically the buy-in is to go to the grocery store and buy meat that's, prepackaged, looks all nice. But they don't really know where it came from, what the animal lived like, all these other important things. They don't really have a selection over that. And you've pointed out, well, I actually know those things. I know how old this animal was. I know, was it close to the end of its life? Where did it come from? How did it live? And so you said that word, kind of inserting yourself, and you're able to insert yourself and kind of, I think, make decisions that fundamentally change how you think about where your food comes from in a world where most people, including myself, most things I eat, have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we as a people, and I mean, myself is included, like if I need something today, if I'm going to have broccoli for dinner and, I don't have a garden going right now. If I need broccoli for dinner, I'm going to go buy that broccoli and I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to try to get the best quality items that I can. But the reality is, we don't live a lifestyle. Some people do that are truly off grid, but we don't live a lifestyle that lends itself to getting everything in this manner. But I think it's much more who you are as a person, how you live your life. And I think the more we hunt, the more we gather, the more we grow, the more we envelope ourselves in wild places and are getting outside and experiencing the wild world. And some of the things that you discovered in the comfort crisis, when you went back, when you took some of our experiences to different researchers and they backed up the things that I guess I was talking about and that you were experiencing as well, with how that affects our psyche and our happiness and our feeling fulfilled. I just think it's where we live best. But man, the infrastructure right now, like you go to New York City, right? You live in downtown New York City. To me, that seems like a hellhole. For me to live in Manhattan would be a prison.
I don't think you would do well there. I really don't think you would do well there. What do you, beyond, because we've been focusing on kind of food and meat, what do you think hunting gives people, well, particularly you, beyond just the meat?
Yeah, I mean, it's time outside, right? It's sunrises, it's sunsets, it's the physicality, much to like the technical book that you have just come out with now about rucking or walking with weight. Like there's a euphoria that comes with going into the wilderness, whether it be hunting, fishing, you're looking for mushrooms, whatever it is. There's a euphoria that comes from peacefully and quietly moving about a space and becoming an observer. You're a frontline observer. You are picking apart everything from the birds, the fowl, the fish, the weather, and just that feeling as a human being, that quiet it's unreal.
Yeah. And I think that one of the important things that happens, because you brought up hunting, foraging, it's a search, right? And so humans evolved as hunters and gatherers. Every single day, we knew we needed food to survive. We had no idea where it was going to be. So we had to insert ourselves in nature. And granted, we lived in nature 100% of the time. Now we spend 93% of our time indoors. We had to go out and search. And that search had to be inherently rewarding for human beings, or else we wouldn't have continued to do it day in and day out. So I think one of the issues that we face today is that the same mechanics of the search for food, for hunting and gathering, they've been put in casino gambling, slot machines. It's same way social media works, all these different things. And that captures our attention the same way that those outdoor searches do, but in a way that doesn't give us all these important things like sunshine, like movement, like exposure to nature, like physical trials, like having to overcome things. And so that's been, it's almost a hijacking of this ancient system, and it doesn't always help us.
I totally agree. And even the things that we're doing, right? I have friends that, for instance, if I'm going to go fishing, I might get in a small boat and paddle down the Mississippi River and cast my lures to, current seams and cast behind logs and behind rocks and cast to places that I know where smallmouth bass or walleyes or muskies, where they're hiding for them to attack their prey. I might go about fishing that way. And then I have other friends that have a boat absolutely encapsulated in electronics with transducers facing out from every and it paints them a beautiful picture of this boulder, this tree. There's actually a fish laying right behind the second branch. It doesn't necessarily make them easier to catch, although you see exactly where it is. But I'll guarantee you that experience is diminished. Everything in our lives is brought up as a shortcut,
Yeah.
like you said. And I mean, imagine, I've done this before. I've been so insanely dehydrated in the mountains because I've run out of water and I'm in an area where there aren't any streams, and I'm not going to have any water until I drop 5,000 feet, and then I have to find water. And I've went through that search and then found cold water, and to this day it was one of the most euphoric experiences of my life. And I've done the same thing. Now, I've never truly been starving, but I've went 3 or 4 days without food until a pilot came and picked me up, or I went 3 or 4 days without food until I arrowed a duck and then was able to eat a duck or something like that. And that is, I mean, it's difficult for me to convey the excitement that you get, like holding a dead green-winged teal. It's snowing outside. I literally hiked 2 miles to come arrow this duck because I could see it on a pond 2 miles away. And I dropped on here to arrow this duck because I'm gonna, I had to arrow this duck. Then I just stripped onto my underwear. So last week of September, I just swim out into a pond that's nearly frozen, grab this dead duck, swim back, dry off as much as I could, get dressed, hike back up, pluck the duck, cook it. But I mean, there's no greater experience.
And it's the best meal you've ever had in your life.
Yeah, it's unreal. And I wish we all still live that way. I really do. Like, and I have no bane against farmers, but when agriculture started, we started having more babies. We started staying in one place. We started, our excrement was now in one place. And that started a ball rolling that we'll never be able to recover from. The earth will recover from it because, we'll go through some sort of, event here that will probably greatly diminish, if not wipe human beings out, whether that be in our lifetime or 50 lifetimes, who knows?
So one thing is that, when you tell stories about your hunts, it sounds so far away for the average person. And I remember when I first kind of became interested in hunting, and it was probably from you and your work before I sent that email to ask you if I could join you on that hunt in Nevada. I remember looking at how do I start? And it was like, oh my God, there are so many things you have to do to get started. It's not like basketball where if I go, I want to play basketball. So I go to Walmart, I buy a ball, and then I just go to the court and I start throwing it at the rim. What I think is interesting though, is most of my friends from high school that hunted, they grew up in hunting families. And so I think people would think, oh, you must have come from this long line of hunters, but you didn't. So how did you even get drawn into hunting and start to live this way?
And that's a really good question. And it's one that I can't entirely answer because when I was little, it was all I thought about. And I don't know if that came from my DNA or if that came from my dad's book collection, because my dad loved wildlife and he had all these different wildlife books. And I lost my dad a little over a year ago. And there were questions. I have so many questions for my dad now that he's gone. But at his funeral, I was talking to one of his very best friends. And he was talking about this adventurous life that I live. And he said, boy, are you your father's son? And I didn't get a chance that day, but I really wanted to ask him because I didn't see my dad as an adventurous man at all. And so I want to ask him, obviously he's referencing something in my dad's youth. And so I don't know what it is that, this gentleman was speaking of, but my dad had a really cool collection of old books, old hunting books and books on military tactics and wilderness survival and fishing and all these different how-to books. And he had small game books that taught you how to hunt squirrels, rabbits, and crows back then to, books on hunting grizzly bears and moose. And I just dove into all these things. And I can sit here and say, I then wanted to be a hunter or a big game hunter or whatever. But really what I wanted, Michael, I think more than anything is that I wanted to live a rural life. I wanted to live in a cabin. I wanted to have to kill a moose for my winter meat. And I haven't gotten all the way there, but that is what I wanted. That's the life that I wanted to live. Those are the things that I find most charming, splitting wood and having to heat your house with firewood and going out and fishing and going out and hunting, because there's there is this euphoria of doing it on your own and supplying for yourself.
Yeah. How did you start? Because I know in college you researched wildlife biology. That's what you
Yep.
studied, right? And then you ended
Yep.
up doing some research on tigers in Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah, in Nepal and Bangladesh. Yep.
What'd you learn from that?
Those are scary places. That is one thing that I learned. I remember just going to the airport, and you've experienced some of this stuff yourself now, but going through machine gun checkpoints and going through checkpoints where everyone's pointing a gun at you and they think your passport is fake. And when I was younger, I thought they really thought my passport was fake. And now as I've gotten older, I realize they just want to bribe so they can get through to the next machine gun checkpoint where he's also going to tell you your passport is fake. And then, being in that research and kind of understanding and seeing, like, for one, when I was in Bangladesh, there's no hunting allowed in that country. But the gentleman that I was working for, he said, hey, careful kind of what you talk about when we're working with the other biologists. He said, because he knew I did a lot of hunting, or that I loved hunting, lived to hunt, I guess. But he also said, you're probably going to get a lot of respect from the biologists here, because even though they don't hunt in the country any longer, the ancestors that were the pillars of their communities, the leaders that were of their tribes, were the better hunters in their tribes. So the hunters would go to the top of the community, and probably because they could provide the most and kind of make decisions on where people needed to go for hunting and gathering. And so he's like, you're probably going to get a lot of respect from them, but just be, roll into it slowly, because more so in a lot of those countries are dealing with so much poaching that they're, it's not that they're anti-hunting, they're anti-poaching, which is, of course, is a very different thing. And I wanted to study wildlife biology because I wanted to be in wild systems, and I wanted to contribute and help wildlife. And as weird it is for some of your viewers or listeners that don't understand hunting, that's also one of the biggest reasons why I hunt, is because I want to be a frontline observer. I want to understand, hey, how come there's a bunch less ducks, and why are we losing so much habitat, and all these different elements that are really, really important. Because as we lose our soils, like, people might think I'm concerned about the white-tailed deer or the black bear or something, but really what's concerning is our soils and our waters, the insects, our grasses, things like that. Because if we still had 10 million buffalo on the plains, like, we would be so far better off than what we have right now, of having endless row crops of corn and soybeans.
Yeah, I think it's, I understand why we have all these things. It's about efficiency. It's the fact that people could start to have a lot of children, and then you go, well, a lot of these people are starving. What if we use some science to give people more food and keep them from starving? And then that propagates. But I do think you're right that we lose something in that process. It's like everything, right? It's like progress has trade-offs. And sometimes those trade-offs are good and sometimes they're bad.
Yeah.
And then you end up doing research. Was it on the Tuluxac River? Is that right?
Yes, in Alaska. Yeah,
And that was doing
Fish and Wildlife Service.
And that was doing salmon counts. So I loved this story. You get sent out for how long were you out there? Like 5 months. And there was a bunch of you that started. And I think you were the last person standing. So tell us about that experience, and what did you learn from all that time alone outside?
Yeah, when I interviewed with my boss, it was really funny because I was nervous. I know these jobs have a lot of competition to get. And so I really wanted to be in the wilderness for the summer, spring, summer, and early in the fall. And so I was studying up on all my biology, because I was like, what is he going to ask me in the interview? How is this going to go? And I better have my ducks in a row. And he said, basically, my interview was, we're going to drop you off in the wilderness. What's the chance that I'm going to have to come and pick you up? And I said, 0. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm not coming out. Like, I'm not going to get homesick. You're not going to have to come get me. He's like, well, that was the biggest thing that they were looking for. And to your point, because a lot of the people that go and do this work, they end up a week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, they're out. Like, they want to get picked up. They want to go home. They want to drink a beer with their buddies. And they want to get back to that infrastructure, that kind of noise that we feel very comfortable with. But I thrived in this, position. Like, this is, they provided me with a tent and a sleeping bag. We had food. We had a research tent. Like I had, even though to the average person, I was roughing it, to me, I had everything that anyone could ever want. And I loved it. I loved being around the wildlife. I loved the quiet. There were times, there's about 4 weeks, 6, 8 weeks where the bugs are, you know, biblical. Like they will
Yeah.
wipe you out. Like it's probably early June to early August. It's significant. And so you just have to get your mind right. You're going to have clouds of mosquitoes. You're going to have, there's going to be, things that you're going to have to face throughout your day. But seeing, I remember like day 3 that I was there, I was talking to this Yupik kid, and I was like, "Hey, man, I have to go take a nap because we'd been working 24 hours a day for a couple of days." I was like, "I got to go lay down." He's like, "Okay." His name's Peter Gregory. He's an awesome, awesome kid, and I said, "But if you see anything cool, come wake me up." He's like, "Okay." And so I went and laid down, and he came over to the tent. I was laying down for maybe 30 minutes, and he's like, "Hey, Donnie, there's a big bear." I was like, "Peter, don't mess with me, man. Like, we're just starting out working together. Like, tell him, be honest." He's like, "I'm serious. Biggest bear I've ever seen in my life is out here." And so I got out, and the bugs weren't out yet. I remember I unzipped my tent. I stood out there with Peter, and I could see this huge tundra flat, which you know what that looks like now. I felt like I could see 20 miles, and I could see the Killbuck Mountains, which Purple Mountain Majesty, like literally looks absolutely perfect. And then here's this behemoth, 1,000-pound plus brown bear just walking right past my tent. His fur is really long from over the winter, and it's blowing in the wind. And he just walked as peacefully by. It looked like every oil painting I've ever seen that has stopped me in my tracks. And that's just being there and doing that stuff and seeing the fish and holding the salmon and understanding the ecosystem and watching that river system. We'd get there early enough, there'd be no fish in the river besides resident species, dolly varden, grayling, northern pike. But then all of a sudden, one day, you could hear the fish in the river. The river would go, it'd be very few eagles, very few gulls, very few wolves and grizzly bears, very few. And then one day the fish would show up and the whole ecosystem would come to life with all the animals that I just listed. And I mean, to see that and experience that and to know that that happens every year in the wilderness, whether we're there or not, I mean, that's everything to me.
I feel like that's this greater metaphor for a lot of ways that we improve. And that is to say, you can't quit until the magic happens. Right? It's like, I'm sure with the people who tapped out, because if I remember right, something like 90% of people don't finish the full 5 months.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think anytime you're doing something that has challenges, you hit this point where you just go, I've had enough. I got to get the hell out of here. Like you just start to freak out. But if you can just kind of wait it out and just wait and see, then you kind of get this second moment where that sort of phase and you go, oh, this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
But if you don't go through that doubt and the struggle, you're never going to get that big, important realization.
I think that's really well said. And I think we experience that a lot in life. And even the things that, I mean, even exercise, right? Like you get to a point with exercise and you're like, this absolutely sucks. But then you get over this hump where it's almost like that ball or wheel starts rolling down the other side of the hill. And you're like, holy cow, I made it. And now embracing the suck is that much easier. And now you have this perspective that you didn't have on the front side. I think that's very well said.
So you start as a hunter, you do this work in Alaska, and then at a certain point you start filming your hunts. And the way that I described your hunts in your films in The Comfort Crisis is I like to say they're a lot like Planet Earth, except they have hunting in them, in the sense that I think if people are aware of any hunting films or documentary they've seen on the Outdoor Channel, they're not good. It's just some people who are kind of, we need to get the buck with the biggest antlers and grip and grins. And yours are very thoughtful and very much embedded in nature. And nature becomes kind of the key character in this. So how did you even start doing the documentaries? And what made you want to do something different? What was it about that you're like, this is how I'm going to do it?
Yep. So it's a long story that I'll give you the cliff notes. And so I was working as a biologist, and I was also going on hunts because it was just all I ever wanted to do. And when I was on these hunts, I started bringing a handy cam and a camera because I wanted to come home and talk to my mom and dad and say, like, look at this grizzly that walked to my camp, and look at this caribou that I saw, and look at the northern lights, and here's the things. It's kind of like bringing my adventures home, tell family and friends. And then through hunting, I would bump into people in airports. I would bump into people in hunting camps or maybe a lodge, and they, we just start talking and say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm a biologist." And then I'd say, "What do you do?" And they'd say, "Oh, I have a TV show on the Outdoor Channel," or I'm editor of this hunting magazine, or whatever it is, invariably. And so I started to meet people, and then people started taking interest in the hunts that I was doing and started asking me, like, "Hey, would you write a magazine article perhaps, or could we photograph you for a magazine article? And then can you show me some of this footage that you have, because I would love to use it for my TV show." And I would just give them my footage. And so one thing kind of led to another. And I did a project with a photographer. I did a sheep hunt in the Yukon, in this Peterson's Hunting magazine, I believe it was, wanted to shoot photos, wanted to do a photo essay of this particular hunt. So the photographer contacted me, and he's like, "Hey," I met him through some other work, and he said, "I would love to tag along with you on this hunt. I'll pay my own way. Take all your photos, and then you'll have access to all the photos, and then he'll have his project." We went and did that, and then that opened a lot of eyes in the industry. People wanted, I started popping up on covers of magazines and in magazine ads. It actually became a problem because I started walking through department stores, and I'd see my face on like men's underwear. And
Awesome.
I didn't understand that there was a market here that was going on. I didn't realize the commercialization of this. And so long story short, I started working with a particular company, and I approached them and I said, "Hey, I would like to maybe get into more professional filming and do some more storytelling." And they said, "Okay." They said, "Well, we have another guy that also is kind of hitting us up for some dollars to do this project over here. Perhaps we can introduce you to, and we can double our dollars down in one place, and you guys can work together and work on a very similar project. Sounds like you guys want to work similarly." And so I went and started doing that project. And that gentleman had, he had a photographer that worked for him, and then the editor that worked for him. And I met these guys, and they're wildly talented. And we started working on this project together. Well, that guy that I got linked up with was not a good man. He wasn't just not a good man. He didn't do things legally. He didn't treat his employees well. He's very talented with a still camera, which is why he had gotten as far as he had gotten. But and so I just decided, this is really cool, filming wildlife in this manner and kind of going down this storytelling road with a bit more of a professional eye. And I thought, maybe we could do this on our own. And so I approached the two guys that worked for him, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to start my own company." And within, a sentence, they said, "Hey, we want to leave and go with you and start this company." And the one guy's name's Kyle Nicolite. He's now my business partner. He is not a man that gives compliments. He does not have the ability to pay someone a compliment. He only is a truth sayer. That's it. And so, like, we were riding a truck one day, and he said, "You're a really good storyteller. You have a very honest approach to your storytelling, and you have a heartfelt sorrow or position that you hold. You're very, very thoughtful in your design and architecture of how you tell a story." And he said, "If you're willing to do that on camera, I think people would respond to it in a very positive way. And I think you could make films that people would watch." And so he is a very gifted editor. And then William Altman, as you know, is a weird little man.
William's in The Comfort Crisis, for those of you who have read the book.
Yes. And so he is an extraordinarily different human being. And I have another sort of William Altman named Forrest Rowe now that works for us. And he is very similar to William. He's 22 years old or 23 now, but all he wants to do is be outside, and all he wants to do is be outside in the right manner, if that makes sense. William.
Yeah.
And so we started a company and we started making films, and then that led to us telling stories for other companies, and we started doing commercial work. And we said no to commercial work for years and years because we didn't want to really necessarily commercialize who we were. And then in true sense of kind of what you just referred to, we started telling stories for other companies, and it started to be terribly rewarding to take our talent set to get to know someone like you. Let's say you wanted to film a piece around the comfort crisis, and to tell your story through what it is that we do. And we really started to grow as a company and doing commercial work, and then also our documentaries.
Yeah, and you guys just released this new documentary, The Way Back.
Yeah.
This is a great one because I really feel like it captures who you are, and it tells the story of this caribou hunt you did, but with this sort of thread of how you done that same hunt with your father, who you mentioned passed away.
Mm-hmm.
How did that all come together? Did you go into that knowing that was what the story was, or did that arise organically, or how did it all happen?
That popped up organically, and in the true essence of the word. And so I started hunting. As things kind of line up in my life, I started hunting with this particular pilot out of Port Ellsworth, Alaska. And I started moose hunting with him and caribou hunting with him. And he's a very difficult place to hunt caribou. And he's like, I think you would really like this place where we hunt caribou. He's like, there's very few animals there. It's a huge area. You're not going to see very many animals at all, but there are some very old and large bulls there that need to be taken because the population basically doesn't have, as the biologist put it, they don't want the caribou to start eating themselves out of house and home. And so this is down in the Alaska Peninsula. It's a lot of weather, very dangerous hunt, and very difficult hunt. So he's like, I think you'd love it. So I started doing that, and I did the first year, and it was awesome. You kind of see a reflection of that in the hunt, and it was such a cool place to be. And we had really nice weather that year, which was remarkable. And we found some really handsome old bulls, and we worked really hard to get to be successful. And so it was awesome. And I remember I was texting my dad because my mom had a stroke. And so I was texting with my dad, and I was like, hey, how's everything going at home? And he's like, good. And he's kind of telling me the ups and downs. And I was getting ready to fly home. This is kind of fun, but I was getting ready to fly home, and I probably had like 4 or 5 days left. And then I was sitting down to do an interview, and I felt the ground shake beneath me. And I was like, oh, that was a pretty big earthquake. And I'd been in earthquakes before, but I was like, that one really moved the earth. And so I contacted one of the pilots via my inReach, and I was like, man, did you guys feel that earthquake at camp? And he's like, it wasn't an earthquake, it was a volcano erupted. He's like, so you felt the volcano erupt? And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, it is cool. He's like, but no airplanes are going to be able to fly now for like 10 days because volcanic ash destroys airplane engines. And so, you're going to have to sit tight and, whatever else, and which I thought was cool. So I was texting my dad about all that stuff, and my dad always thought, like, he'd always ask me, like, hey man, where are you going? What are you up to? Or if I text him, he'd be like, where are you? Cause he wouldn't even really know where I was. And then he always, wanted me to get home safe. And he's like, you can't keep doing this work and not come up short, And so we'd always talk about it. I know that. And so fast forward, and I end up suddenly losing my dad and my mom within 10 weeks. And so then my life just continues like all of ours do. And, you obviously exist with great sorrow. And I didn't always have a great relationship with my dad. And he was very much like some of your humble beginnings in the comfort crisis. My dad, I knew my dad I had a relationship with alcohol. That's what I knew when I was growing up. It was my dad and beer. And he was a great drunk, if you will. Like, he just drank, and there wasn't fighting or anything, and that was his thing. But he didn't have a lot of time for me. And I grew up in a household with a brother and sister that were, they weren't, they were troubled. And so my parents were very, very focused on my brother and sister. So anyway, so when my dad and my mom passed, uh, it affected me much more than I thought it would, because I instantly thought of a million questions that I wanted to ask my dad, things that I couldn't conjure up when he was alive, right? I'd take him deer hunting and we'd sit in the truck and we'd talk about the weather or if the crops were out. And it would always make me kind of giggle. He'd always tap his fingers on the windowsill of my truck and he'd be like, "Oh, a lot of corn is still standing," or we talk about the weather. And my dad had an interesting life. He was in the Navy. And now I'm curious, when his friend said, "Oh, you are your father's son." Now I'm really curious about, like, was he fishing a lot more than he ever told me about? My dad wasn't a talker, so he didn't tell stories. And so fast forward, my life continues and we're going in on this project on the peninsula again, because I wanted to get out there and see more of that country. And yeah, there was just a complexity in my emotions and the things that I was doing that I didn't anticipate from that. And so, yeah, and I wanted to put a film together and kind of talk about some of that stuff, because I mean, it's as raw and as, revealing, as vulnerable as, I guess, as a person can be.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was excellent. And I thought also that it really highlighted how you stand out in the hunting world in a way that you'll talk about those things. I think you're a lot more, I would say, intellectual hunter. I would even say spiritual hunter. I would be interested in two things. How have those views evolved? Have you always had them? Have they changed over time? And then also, how have you been received in the quote unquote traditional hunting world?
When I was younger, I thought I had to behave a certain way that I was kind of seeing on TV, or I was seeing, like, with buddies of mine, to where, like, if we killed a deer, we would hoot and holler, and I would be excited. If I shot a buck and I was hooting and hollering, it wasn't fake. I was really excited. And, like, buddies of mine, when we first started hunting, we would come up empty-handed 99% of the time. So when we finally got a deer, like, we'd hug and, like, holy cow. And even though we just lived it, we'd tell each other the story again. And, like, he came down this ridge and, and we'd do all this stuff. But once you were over that emotional dump, you'd look at this animal, and I would, and you'd see the blood coming out of his wounds, and you'd understand that, oh, my arrow passed through his heart, or my bullet passed through his lungs, and he ran. And I'd put myself in this perspective of, I'd watch him tip over, and I knew that he's losing his life right now. And so I would think about that. And what if that was me? What if I was the one that had been shot? I'm over there trying to take my next breath, but my lungs are filling, and I would just have this connection of understanding, or at least I would think about, what did this deer go through? And now that he's laying there and I'm going to start skinning him, I'm looking at his eyes and his nose, and, and right away, I'd start cleaning the blood up, and I start brushing the dirt off his face and putting his tongue back in his mouth if his tongue had fallen out, and things that I felt were appropriate. And so, and I've just always had this ultimate respect of, don't take the animal's life until you're entirely ready, or this is the animal, or this is the moment, this is what you're going to do. And then once you do that, there's proper steps that you need to take to utilize this animal and to be kind of in this wild system. And so, while I've always felt that great connection, it took me a while to understand. And to be honest with you, you were also a big piece of my growth, because talking to you about this stuff for the Men's Health magazine was something that I'd never done before. And in talking and teaching it to you, or in talking about it openly with you, I found areas of my brain and things that I talked about, kind of where you'd ask me a question, I'd say a sentence, and I'd go, yeah, that's how I feel. But I haven't had to conjure that sentence up to anyone else, because nobody else had asked me that question. And so then I started to understand. Then once I read The Comfort Crisis, And I started to see all these metrics that you went and put to the things that I was experiencing. And then also even actually with the scarcity brain, and kind of seeing like, I kind of giggled when I read the scarcity brain, because it's very easy to look at somebody and be like, dude, you're getting hoodwinked with a slot machine. But then I also looked at it as my own life, and I was like, man, I'm getting hoodwinked with a white-tailed deer, because every November, it's all I can think about. And every springtime, I want to go out and tap trees right now for maple syrup, and I have firewood to cut, and then I'm going to have fish that I'm going to go chase. And so it's kind of the same thing a little bit. I mean, there's no bells and whistles, but I get maple syrup comes out of the tree. Once I boil it down, it's kind of the same thing. You get it in. And so I didn't always have this soulful, heartful connection to where I could articulate it, but I always took that time, even around my buddies. I didn't talk to them about it, but I always took that time to put myself in the deer's shoes, if you will, or to put myself in the duck's shoes, and to do these things. And I'd killed a couple animals when I was younger. Like I shot a blue jay once. I shot a black-capped chickadee once. These are non-game species that I just cause and effect. I had a gun. I was a little kid or younger kid. I saw a bird and I shot it, fell. And those were immediate for me. Immediate no-nos and sorrows. And like, I remember I shot the chickadee and instantly I was like, I just took this animal's life for absolutely no reason. And then I kind of let someone talk me into shooting the blue jay. And then I learned then that I was like, doesn't matter what anyone else wants. It matters what I want. And then even when we first started, and working with you, and then when we wrote our first film in 2012, I wrote this voiceover for the film and I handed it to Kyle Nicolai, and he read it and he's like, this is terrible. He's like, you have to rewrite all of this. He's like, I've never, ever heard you talk like this, but I wrote it in a manner that I thought we were going to entertain people. And he educated me much like you did in some essence, where he's like, you have to make these films as though no one's going to watch them. You have to make these films so they're so true to who you are that it doesn't matter if anyone else watches it, because if you make it for you, then, and you're being completely honest, then you'll never have to chase any sort of fashion or a different type of decision or inspirations or whatever.
Yeah, dude, isn't that such a good metaphor for art and how to live?
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, why copy everyone else? Just do your own thing.
Make it for you.
If people like it, great. If they don't, you still got something internally rewarding from it.
Yeah, and if you chased the things that people liked, which change all the time, you're always going to be 1% behind or 10% behind where the people are going. You're always, and you're not doing anything that's true to yourself. So it's literally it's an empty bucket.
Well, then you have to become, you're copying what has become the trend. Whereas I would argue with your case, you have started a trend of hunting documentaries that are different than what was before. Like you're kind of the pioneer. You're seeing a lot more documentaries that are shot like Planet Earth, if you will, that are asking big questions. When you first released your first documentaries, what was the reaction in the hunting community?
I thought we were going to get murdered, if I'm being honest. I thought the guys
Hunters do have guns.
Yep. And I thought the guys are it's going to be horrible. And it wasn't. People came out of the woodwork and said, I've thought about this for years. I've never articulated it to my buddies. I've had these same sorrows. I've had the same seriousness. Other guys came. I mean, I'll be honest with you. A couple of guys came to me and said, this is, ridiculous. It's just hunting. It's just a deer, but very, very little of that, Michael. Much more was people then wanted their kids to watch our stuff. And then, hunting instructors wanted their pupils to watch our stuff, and to, guys that were going to get their hunter safety cards. And there was a lot of stuff like that. I met a young lady last week at a convention. I met her dad, and she started a company called Cookies for Conservation. And so where she started baking cookies in their kitchen, she would go out and sell it. This was something that she wanted to do. She was 13 or 14 and she started selling all these cookies. She gives 100% of the proceeds. I'm sure she buys cookie dough and stuff with her, but she gives 100% of her proceeds to wildlife habitat and generating wildlife habitat. And he's like, that you are the one that inspired her to do this stuff.
Awesome.
And so, yeah. And I got another guy. He's like, hey, can I take a picture with you? He's like, my kids are going to flip out. He's like, you are, and this is so weird, but he's like, you're our kids' reward for if like they crush their metrics during the week of school and sports or whatever, they get to watch Donnie Vincent films on the weekend. And
awesome.
So like, yeah, so it's stuff like that, and I've received very little negative, feedback. Some of it, some guys don't want to listen to the long drawn out answers or writing or kind of the reflective nature of it. They don't want to do that. And then of course, some people are just, they're just against what I'm doing altogether. But it's very few.
What's interesting is I think that even vegans see some value in what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're not getting all these letters from vegans that are negative. Well, many are positive.
Many are positive, and then they are curious. They'll say, okay, for instance, I'll tell you one. I did this shoot years ago. We did this shoot with a company called Zeal Optics. They make sunglasses and snow goggles and stuff. And they invited us out to this big photo shoot, and they're doing a new catalog, and I was one of their athletes. And so it was me and all these Red Bull dudes and girls, all these super talented people. And so the first night we all got in this house, and everyone's in their Red Bull gear, and I'm just sitting there like, I've seen you in a magazine. I'm sitting there, and the guy's like, okay, first thing first, we're going to go around the room, say your name, your discipline, what you do, and why you're here. And so all these people are going around like, I'm a professional snowboarder, I'm a professional downhill mountain biker, all this stuff. And there's a guy named Mike Dowdy. He's, I think, the best wakeboarder in the world out of Florida. Been a Red Bull guy forever. And he's laying on the couch, and he has his Red Bull baseball cap over his eyes, which if anyone knows anything about Red Bull, you can't even buy a Red Bull baseball cap. So if you see somebody with a Red Bull baseball cap, like they're probably have gobs of talent. So anyway, he's laying there with his baseball cap on his eyes, and it's going all the way around, and it comes to me, and I'm like, my name's Donnie Vincent. I'm an adventure bow hunter. And they're all kind of looking at me, and he lifts his cap up, and he looks over, and he says, what did you just say? And I said, my name's Donnie Vincent. I'm an adventure bow hunter, filmmaker. And he just sat there, and he's like, coolest freaking thing I've ever heard in my life. And he put his hat back over his face. And so all of those people, most of those people, a lot of those people were, against hunting or had questions about hunting or were vegans or vegetarians or whatever. And the next morning I was up early getting a cup of coffee, and one of the dudes was a professional surfer. And he's like, man, I've never eaten meat in my entire life. He goes, both my parents eat meat. He goes, I've never eaten meat in my entire life. But he said, and he kind of looked around. He's like, but I have always wanted to be a bow hunter. And he's like, what is that all about? And I go, it's from our ancestry, man. I said, and he's like, I feel this connection in the waves. He talked about feeling the energy of the earth in the waves. And he's talking about seeing fish and all this stuff. And I was just like, he's like, where's that coming from? And I said, that's from us being hunters and gatherers. Your ancestors hunted and gathered and would skin buffalo and eat meat and would forage. And I said, that was a very successful way for us to live and a very rewarding way for us to grow muscle in our minds and to learn our thumbs and create fire. And so I said, that's probably where it comes from. And I've had other vegans and vegetarians. In fact, I probably received more positivity from that community of people than I have from hunters, if you will. And they have questions, and then they'll say, I don't want to be a hunter, but my wife and I would like to start shooting rabbits that we have on our land and eating rabbits. And I say, okay. So I kind of give them, I'd say, okay, do you want to do it with a bow or with a gun? We want to do it with a gun at first. We're not skilled with the bow. Okay, buy this gun. And we talk about it. And then they send me pictures of like him and his wife in the kitchen, skinned out rabbits, carrots cut up, all this stuff. And then they'd send me, and it's funny because they would say to me, I don't want to be a hunter, but this is what I want to do. And then, obviously I'm sitting there on the backside going, don't look now, but you're a hunter. Doesn't mean you have to go out and try to shoot the biggest deer on the land, or go out and shoot a giant caribou that you're going to mount and hang on the wall, or, some of the things that we do around our films or whatever. And like with you, I remember when I mailed you and your beautiful wife a box of elk meat from the elk that I killed in Nevada. I remember right away you messaged me back and you're like, I think this is the finest meat I've ever eaten. I think that's what you said.
It was awesome. And even she liked it. And she's not a big meat eater. She was worried at first, and she goes, this is actually great.
It's awesome. And then you going and getting your caribou and having your caribou meat and your caribou hide, and it's been a lot of inquisitive people. And I get a lot of people that write me that will say, hey, I totally disagree with you killing this mountain lion, but can you walk me through how you did it and why you did it? And I walk them through it, and they'll say, okay, I didn't like it, but I totally appreciate your explanation and the why you did it and how you did it and all these different things. And I like those conversations. I think that's really important. Like I said, we live in that gray area.
So a lot of people who are listening to this right now, they may not want to hunt. They may have no interest. But how can they take some of the lessons from your hunts and find ways to apply them to get a lot of the same benefits? And I'm going to give you an example here. So after our hunt, I started spending a lot more time in the wilderness. And I just did this 45-day backcountry hike across southern Utah. I wasn't hunting. I was walking every day. But I will say I experienced a lot of the same benefits that I did when I was reporting the comfort crisis with you up in Alaska for more than a month. How do you think that if people don't want to hunt, how do you think they get some of the benefits you do? And to sort of set this off, I'm going to read you a quote of yours. To experience fantastic things, you have to put yourself in fantastic places. What can that tell us?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I said that sentence when we were on the top of a mountain in the Arctic Circle. We were in the Mackenzie Mountains of the Northwest Territories. And I said that to one of my crew, and I was like, you want to experience fantastic things, you have to put yourself in fantastic places. But really, I've come to realize that fantastic place that you have to be in is in your mind. Because the reality is, you and I could go out I'm in a log cabin on 10 acres of woods here in Wisconsin. And you and I could go out and set a tent right now on my 10 acres and get a couple of bows out or a couple of 22s out. We could go and hunt my population of gray squirrels that I have here amongst all my oak and maple trees and kill 3 or 4 or 5 gray squirrels, skin them out, bring them back to our tent, start a fire, and cook them in a frying pan over our wood stove in the teepee, and sit down and have this podcast. Dare I say this? You're in Las Vegas right now, right, Michael? Mm-hmm. And I'm in Wisconsin. We're doing this over our computers. If you said, hey, I want to experience something while we do this, and I said, okay, we'll fly out here. We'll hike around my 10 acres. We'll go kill a couple of squirrels. We'll sit down in the teepee. We'll start a fire, and we'll cook the squirrels over the fire, and we'll have this conversation in the teepee. Our experience would be tenfold what it is over a couple of computers. Yeah. And so I realized you don't have to go to the Arctic Circle and hunt caribou or doll sheep or grizzly bears. You can do this in your own backyard. You can do this in a state forest. You can do this. It's a presence and a mindfulness that is the fantastic place for you to be in. And even if you don't want to hunt, you can become a fisherman. If you don't want to fish, then you can just explore. And the walkabout that you just did, the 45-day walkabout, go and do that. Watch the sun come up. Watch the sun go down. Understand when the rain is coming, when the wind is coming. Put yourself through some hardships, and you will come out on the other side a happier, more fulfilled, healthier person. It's without a doubt. You can't come out the other side if you live in your essence of what's the first rule of a Musogi? Don't die, right?
Make it really hard. The second rule is don't die.
Second rule, don't die. Beyond that, you will come out a better person.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I'll say for me, the time in the wilderness has always been my greatest teacher because it strips away control. And I feel like modern life, a lot of the technology we have is to put us in control of every variable. We've got calendar scheduling everything out. We've got technology that can deliver food. We got X, Y, Z. Everything is predictable and in control. And when you get outside, that all gets stripped away. You might get lost. You can't predict what the terrain is going to be like. You can't predict what the weather is going to be like. Shit is going to go totally off the rails, but you got to figure it out. And it's in that process of having certainty and control stripped away where you have to figure it out that people begin to realize something that I think we've lost, and that's that you can just figure things out and do things and become competent. And then for me, that tracks back into everyday life where I get an email I don't want to deal with. I go, you just survived a lightning storm out in the desert. I think you can be okay going to this meeting you don't want to go to. And that just that fundamentally changes your relationship to your everyday life, for me at least.
I totally agree. And I think like when you were with us in the Arctic, I could see it on your face. You were bored. There's portions of that time where you're like,
so damn bored.
Now what do we do? Because when you're out there, are there animals or aren't there animals? If there are animals, how do we get into position to look at them better? How do we get into position to maybe take one and take it back to camp? Is it raining? Do you have to put your rain gear on, or is it not raining? Are you cold? Do you have to put your down on, or are you cold and it's raining? You need to put your down. And you start going through these things like, oh, hey, we have no idea what day it is, but we know we need water, and we know we're running low on food, and we know we're probably going to have to hike to the next drainage because the caribou don't seem to be coming through here any longer. But those purities for me, having a tent, having to maybe have a wood fire and carry all your supplies in a backpack and have to deal with, 100-mile-an-hour wind or an 80-mile-an-hour wind, or being bluff charged by a grizzly bear, and having a grizzly that is now starting to harass your camp because he realizes, like, if I harass these guys enough, I'm going to be able to steal all their food and maybe even, kill one of them or whatever. And, you start to like break all these things down, but there's an essence, the simpleness of it that is such a pure way of living life. And, but when you come from the rat race, like if I took somebody, and I'd love to do this sometime, but if you took somebody that had a totally, like, take a guy that goes clubbing every night or something like that in New York City and just take him out there and then just be like, yeah, first of all, we're going to hike 10 miles today and you are going to hate yourself. There's going to be blisters all over your legs and your thighs are going to chafe, and however strong you think you are in the gym, this is going to wear you out.
It's not going to work. Yep.
Not going to work. And then you're going to sit there and have to reflect. And I just think that stuff is, I often think, what if things just continued in the hunter and gatherer society? Who would we be as a people? What would the world look like?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Final practical questions. What's your most important pieces of gear?
I mean, the reality is it's your mindset.
And that comes through getting out there. And I feel like that's an equation of time and not quitting, like we talked about in the beginning. You need to go out prepared enough. You need to know that there's going to be a lot of hurdles, but you just got to take them one at a time. And in the process of hurdling, you get better at hurdling.
Yeah, because I've even seen people do, like we might have gear in the essence of, really nice rain gear so that we can go further in the rain. We might have really nice down gear so we can exist further into the cold. But if you look at the guys that were 100 years ago and they were dealing with animal skins and wolves, and even look at some of the Eskimos now and some of the tribes that are way up on the ice cap and stuff, like they do amazing things with just seal skins and polar bear skins and things like that. And really the gear is it's a hack, if you will. And you even look at the stuff that we use. Another company made it. So it's this shortcut that we're complaining about. It's the same shortcut, because if I had to go out and get a seal to make my mucklucks or get a seal to then make my parka, now we're talking. Like that is a very real essence, but everything in life comes with its kind of give and take. But I would say your mindset and positivity. I think people greatly underestimate our lack of time on the face of the earth. I think people greatly underestimate a positive attitude. And I think people greatly underestimate how interesting you are to the rest of us. If you were just going to be yourself, no matter what that is, we will find you be you, and we will find you terribly interesting.
That feels like a hell of a note to end on. Donnie, my man, this was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on.
Same,
Final,
man. Anytime.
Final question. What's our next adventure? I feel like we're due for one.
Yeah, we're due for one. We need to you and I need to talk. I would love to go on a walkabout with you where we're actually hunting or doing something along those lines, or even maybe a sort of Canadian canoe trip where we canoe up into a wilderness and have to portage and paddle and shovel water for a bunch of days and go catch some fish. And I think that'd be a lot of fun to just go and kind of sit back again, reflect. And I'd I've read all of your books, but I'd like to hear about them again from your mouth and hear your ideas and the things that you're experiencing. And I'd really enjoy that.
I'd love that, man. Let's plan on it. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael.
There you have it. Thanks so much to Donnie Vincent for coming out of the wilderness for more than an hour to have an awesome conversation with us. And thank you for tuning in. As always, we're going to be in your feed twice a week, so please keep an eye out for more. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments or send us an email. Even better, if you want to send us a voice memo or a video of yourself asking the question, we would absolutely love that, and we will try to answer as many as we can. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and as always, have fun, don't die.